The Elder Scrolls. 5. Skyrim is a fantasy action role-playing game, playable from either a first or third-person perspective. The player may freely roam over the land of Skyrim, an open-world environment consisting of wilderness expanses, dungeons, caves, cities, towns, fortresses, and villages. Players may navigate the game world more quickly by riding horses, paying for a ride from a city's stable, or utilizing a fast travel system that allows them to move their character immediately to a previously discovered location. Yakuza 0 is an action-adventure game set in an open-world environment and played from a third-person perspective. The game takes place from December 1988 to January 1989 in Kamurocho and Sotenbori, fictionalized recreations of Tokyo's Kabukicho and Osaka's Dotonbori areas, respectively. The player controls series protagonist Kazuma Kiryu and recurring character Goro Majima, alternating between the two at predetermined points during the story. Watch Dogs 2 is an action-adventure game with stealth elements and played from a third-person perspective as Marcus Holloway, a young hacker. The game features an open world set in a fictionalized version of the San Francisco Bay Area, an area more than twice as large as the Chicagoland setting from Watch Dogs. It consists of 4 different areas: San Francisco, Oakland, Marin County, including the city of Sausalito, and Silicon Valley. Players can navigate the game's world on foot or by the various vehicles featured in the game, such as cars, trucks, buses, cable cars, motorcycles, quad bikes, and boats. The driving mechanic was overhauled and designed to be more accessible. The player can shoot their weapons while driving. Marcus also has improved acrobatic skills and the ability to parkour around the city. Mad Max is an action-adventure game set in an open-world, post-apocalyptic environment caused by resource shortages and ecocide. It emphasizes vehicular combat, in which the player is the eponymous Mad Max. According to its publisher, up to 60% of the game focuses on driving. Some weapons and tools, including flamethrowers and turbo boosts, are mounted directly onto the magnum opus, while others, such as a harpoon and sniper rifle, are used in conjunction with the vehicle by Chumbucket, Max's assistant, or Max himself. Max's magnum opus, with its V8 engine and powerful ramming ability, can destroy enemies' vehicles and weaponry. When simultaneously driving and aiming, the game changes to slow motion to allow the player to toggle between targets. Although Mad Max primarily uses a third-person perspective, the player can switch to first-person view when fighting enemies while driving the magnum opus. Chumbucket repairs the car when instructed to do so or when the player exits. Assassin's Creed Odyssey is an action role-playing video game played from a third-person perspective. At the beginning of the game, the player can select to play as either Alexios or Cassandra, Greek mercenaries and descendants of the Spartan king Leonidas Thirst. In addition to completing the story campaign, players can freely explore a large open world set in Greece on foot or on horseback. As the player explores the world, they will encounter various non-playable characters, NPCs, who give players side missions to complete. They also discover locations of interests, clear out fortresses and camps, explore tombs and shipwrecks, and collect hidden treasures. Synchronization points in various landmarks in Greece, which serve as fast travel points, can also be unlocked. Middleearth Shadow of War is an action-adventure game set in an open world and played from a third-person perspective. The player controls the game's protagonist, Talion, who has several athletic and combative abilities as a Ranger of Gondor. The combat system in Shadow of War is similar to its predecessor. Talion can use his weapons to strike enemies and build up his might meter. Once Talion lands 8 consecutive strikes, they can perform a combat finisher move, massively damaging an enemy's health. When an enemy is about to strike Talion, a symbol will appear on top of their head, signaling the player to parry their attacks. Unblockable attacks are highlighted in red, and the player must try to dodge those attacks. In addition to melee combat, Players can also utilize stealth tactics when approaching their targets. Talion also has unique abilities provided by the wraith of the elf lord Celebrimbor, with whom he shares his body. The Evil Within. Similar to its predecessor, the game is a survival horror game. Played from a third-person perspective or a first-person perspective, the player assumes control of Detective Sebastian Castellanos, who must descend into the world of Union to rescue his daughter, Lily. There are 5 difficulty modes, namely Casual, which producer Shinji Mikami recommends, Survival, Nightmare, which is the setting recommended for players who enjoyed the difficulty curve in the previous game, Classic, which is mostly identical to Nightmare, but limits the amount of saves and removes upgrades, and Akumu, which is also mostly identical to Nightmare, but causes the player to die in a single hit from anything. In The Evil Within. 2. Maps are larger and there are multiple ways for players to advance in a level. The player is also given an item known as the Communicator, which helps to highlight the objectives, resources, and enemies featured in the game's world. Red Dead Redemption 2 is a Western-themed action-adventure game. Played from a first- or third-person perspective, the game is set in an open-world environment featuring a fictionalized version of the United States in 1899. It features single-player and online multiplayer components, the latter released under Red Dead Online. For most of the game, the player controls outlaw Arthur Morgan, a member of the Vanderlinde gang, as he completes missions, linear scenarios with set objectives, to progress the story. From the epilogue, the player controls Red Dead Redemption protagonist John Marston. Outside of missions, they can freely roam the interactive world. They may engage in combat with enemies using melee attacks, firearms, bow and arrow, throwables, or explosives, and can dual-wield weapons. The player can swim as Arthur, but not as John. State of Decay. 2 is a zombie survival game, with an emphasis on scavenging for items, in which gameplay is experienced from a third-person view. The game is set in an open-world environment and features cooperative gameplay with up to 3 other players. The player can choose from several locations to build a base, then reinforce and improve it with various facilities like watchtowers, gardens, sleeping quarters, kitchens, workshops, medical bays, etc., to help keep survivors safe and healthy. Part of the game is balancing the use of resources, food, medicine, ammo, and construction materials. They can be obtained by scavenging or trading with NPCs. The player can interact with survivors outside of their group, trading with them, helping them, or recruiting them. Only one survivor can be controlled at a time, though the player can ask an AI-controlled survivor to accompany them, and in certain missions, one or more AI-controlled survivors will accompany the player. Final Fantasy XV is an open-world action role-playing game where players take control of protagonist Noctis Lucas Calum during his journey across the world of Eos. While accompanied by his 3 companions Gladiolus, Ignis, and Prompto, Noctis is the only character directly controlled by the player. He can navigate through movement, jump over small obstacles, sprint for a limited time, and perform context-based actions such as taking cover behind objects. The Kingdom of Lucis is a large connected landmass that can be explored on foot by using the party's car regalia, or chocobos, recurring galliform birds in the Final Fantasy series. Both the regalia and chosen chocobos can be customized by the player, and chocobos can join in battles if their connection to the characters is strong enough. While chocobos are controlled manually, the regalia can be either manually or automatically controlled. The party can also fast travel to areas unlocked on the world map.